Welcome to Merchman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, hear about the different growth stages in wheat and what to look for regarding freeze injury. What are some of the things we look at when it comes to replant and determining stand? Are you checking nitrogen levels in your soil? How can nitrogen levels affect yield?
Hi, this is Joe Merchman. Welcome to Merchman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we have Ben and Lynn, and we're going to talk just some general things that are going on this week that you should probably be alerted to.
Yeah, so Thursday night going into Friday, our friends in northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, there's really kind of a pocket that goes over into Michigan too. Saw some cooler temperatures, cooler than what they probably wanted to see at this time of year. So I wanted to talk about wheat resistance to freeze injury. So we're going to go through the different growth stages and where wheat can get nipped a little bit. So tillering, obviously, that has probably, we're already way past that stage. You were up looking at some wheat in the northern Illinois area. Yep. What stage were you looking at wheat this week?
It varied. So the planting dates were a little bit variable, depending on the timing. There was anywhere between probably just after tillering to, I bet they'll have a head emergence coming here within the next week.
Gotcha.
To 10 days. So very variable in that neck of the woods, but I would say though that the stand's very consistent and everything looked pretty good, short of some pockets where they did do, from a management standpoint, some wheat after corn stubble and just maybe didn't get that residue completely shoved underneath the ground. So had some issues with stand emergence there, but overall extremely impressive given that they were probably, I would say for us locally, 10 days behind us planting, and then they have just been, to what you're going to talk about, cool and very lacking in the sunshine department.
Right. So for tillering, we can get all the way down to 12 degrees before we start to see some leaf chlorosis, burning of the leaf tips. So it's moderate to slight if you see any yield damage, but we're definitely not at the 12 degrees point. Jointing, we can get down to 24 degrees before we see any damage. Again, that's moderate from a yield standpoint. There's probably some wheat up in that neck of the woods. We didn't get down to 24 degrees, so that shouldn't be an issue. Boot. So the boot stage is when that head is rising up through the center of the plant there.
Yeah, you can feel it in the inside.
Yep. So before you get to heading, we can get down to 28 degrees. That can be severe if we dip below 28. I don't think there was a huge area that would have got below that 28 degree mark, but heading is where some of the furthest along would probably have been, and we can get down to 30 degrees. So I haven't spent any time talking with customers up there yet. I think we probably avoided the damage that could happen with the cool temperatures, but I always love this graph, and I think it's always a fun one. Usually when we're talking about this, it's usually late frosts that happen in the south where things are progressing along very quickly. So it's
and the temperatures are taken at 5 feet, I think, official temperatures, and the ground's going to be a little bit warmer. So
exactly.
So you got a little bit of fudge factor on those numbers, in my opinion.
Yeah, because Tuesday when I was talking to you on the phone, I think I looked down and it was 77 degrees for the air temp. So I mean, there is some ambient temperature that is probably going to be radiated out of the ground to keep that microclimate within that wheat growing zone, not completely to what the air temperature was.
Right, and I'll pull out my phone here because I wanted to look at some variety information that we had from one of our originators, and it was talking about the millie, which is one of our ultra early, hyper early products, and he says that he's never seen a product quite like this product because the Millie 8 is it's a product that joints very late but gets through maturity very quickly. So he's taken notes on it, and it has delayed jointing, which is good from a cold standpoint, from a frost standpoint, because you don't want that plant to go ahead and jump out, but it speeds its way through the maturity process. So he's looking at it in the north, and it's delayed jointing in the north, and he's looking at it in the south, and it's moving through heading and anthesis extremely fast compared to some of the other medium earlies that are in the ultra earlies that are out there. So it's really nice when we have products like that and guys that are taking really good notes for us, our ability to push these ultra and hyper earlies in the north. We want products that do things like this Millie 8. So
I think, and talking with him one of the wheat fields in particular, just on some observations that I had that he kind of backed up. It is something that I thought was interesting. As we look at these, you kind of have to change your mindset a little bit when you're a wheat grower. They are maybe a little bit slower to come out of the green up stage in comparison to, in particular, this farmer had another variety from a different company in us. That one he was familiar with, said it is if there's one thing it's known for in the industry, it is green up and tillering right out of dormancy. Where these, he goes, yeah, I've seen maybe just a little bit of a quote unquote struggle, but the interesting fact that he made was, he goes, just wait. I know those both well, and the combine will tell the true story. So what that tells me, we're not predicated on these hyper and ultra earlies are not predicated on vegetative growth, and we've seen it. When you go out and look at some of them, they can be very, very short plant, but then throw a very large head related to that. Good for standability. It's putting a lot into the kernel development. So very exciting to see that in comparison, because it's always good to see different products out in the marketplace on how they compare. So the other fact too that we thought was very interesting, related to how this guy wanted to manage it, we're setting, even though we were late, we're setting really good, because he thought, to your point, once we get through joining, he's going to see a rapid development, where this other particular variety is very slow on the back end. So we're looking at, he estimates almost a 14-day difference between when this guy will be able to harvest one half of the field versus the other. And given this as an intercrop situation, it's going to be pretty good for us in that regard to fit into that particular grower's portfolio there.
Yep. And he is going back and looking at data as well. So you compare the two products that we are raising for seed production. You got the Millie and the Peyton. Peyton is actually 2 to 3 days earlier from that standpoint, but it also joints earlier. So when we have products that we're looking at for a frost freeze, if guys are nervous about that, or they're out there planting a week before the Hessian fly free date, you may be leaning towards the Millie rather than the Peyton. Or if you're worried about frost risk in the south, same concept, you'd be leaning a little bit towards the Millie, but you're trading off days at harvest for that matter. So,
and I'd be remiss to say that the Binti up there looks absolutely phenomenal too.
Good. So some of the other things that we have had happen this week is, you've been out on a couple replant calls, I've been out on a couple replant calls, and not necessarily replant calls, but guys are, asking that we go ahead and just, start paying attention.
Yep.
It seems like beans are coming out of the ground awfully slow. We've had some hard pounding rains after planting. So what are some of the things that we look at when we are going to do replant?
So the first, just to get, I guess, a little bit of a backdrop related to the ones that are around here, anything that was planted before Easter had very good post-planting conditions in relation to germination and emergence, where we kind of kept catching these a little bit of showers. Had one pretty good one on Easter, and then kind of kept these showers. It seems now there is a window within that last part of April where the weather forecast had some rain, but it wasn't supposed to be very much, and then it turned out being far more than it was expected. So what we're dealing with is some crusting over issues, both on some what I would call prairie style soils and some white oak timber soils. The one in particular, before recording, I was out looking at the prairie soils. I think we're going to be fine, but the one thing if you feel like you're going to have some crusting issues, is make sure you're digging them up and make sure that the seed is viable. And then the question was the rotary hoe, and back to what we talked about a couple weeks ago. That should have been done probably 3 days ago, if not 4 days ago. Because right now, I would say probably just a little bit shallower planted. It's starting to push that crust up just a little bit. And I do believe that we're going to have a fine stand, and we're not going to have any issues with that. What I think the farmer in particular was seeing is that one, kind of similar to what we talked about last week with PPO, kind of takes one for the team a little bit. It gets that ground cracked and then gets pushing that soil up, and then it breaks its neck. But if you look beside it where it kind of created the slot is opening back up, those beans are starting to poke through in that particular soil type. Now on the timber soil, we're probably not as fortunate in that one. It looks like it ran back together, but the biggest thing when it comes to that and the questions that we're getting on that, we have to determine what our stand is. If we're not completely through emergence, which in particular in these fields we are not, we can't make any decision until we see that. Because what we run the risk of is that hypothetically a pop-up shower softens this back up, more are coming, we could end up with 250 to 300,000 plant stand, and we're doing more harm there. That or, like in pockets, if we have to touch up stuff, we need to determine what the size is to make sure that we're doing the appropriate amount. So that's what those particular situations where we're at right now. And the biggest thing is, I know it's an extremely emotional decision with replant. And this one in particular, time is our friend. The forecast looks fine. We just got to be able to get an established emergence final harvest count or be able to determine final emergence count to make that decision. Because in that particular article that Joe sent us, they're talking about now even getting down into 50,000 plant stand.
Yeah, and if you go back to our Crops and Soil magazine from 1981, which they did all kinds of studies at Purdue, it's 40,000 is what they say. So 50,000, 40,000, it works out to about 2.5 beans per foot a row, which average farmer, if they had 2.5 beans per foot, they'd say tear it up. But that's where yield reduction starts on early planted soybeans. So
I'd like to read a couple bullet points
I
from
think
this
that's
article
great.
that you
Go
sent
ahead
out.
and go into it.
It's an effective stand is obviously important to maximize soybean seed yield. However, the downside risk for a subpar stand is minimal until stands fall below 50,000 plants per acre. The synergy of early planting coupled with breeding adds 3 times the yield potential to soybean branches at lower populations. So, and this is from University of Wisconsin. Early planted soybeans maximize their yields with stands ranging from 100,000 in high yield environments and 135,000 in low yielding environments. When stands fall below an optimal 50,000 plants per acre, they always want you to think twice before you replant. The data shows that if you go in and replant, there's a nominal 2 bushel yield increase for adding more to a 50, 60, 70,000 stand. And you're better off to invest more dollars in in-season residual herbicides to control weeds such as Palmer amaranth and water hemp. So I've seen it before. As long as you have those even stands, because of things like crusting, which typically take out a percentage, they don't take out huge sections of the field. As long as you have that even stand of 50, 60, 70, 80,000, you can get by with not having to go in and stab those in and replant. I haven't seen anything lower than 50 right now. If the fields that I looked at, if no more beans emerge at this point, you're going to have 70, 80, 90, 100, and there are more beans emerging.
Correct.
So
just a little experience on the MS Tech side, on the breeding side. They'll plant soybeans at 6 pounds per acre in the increase process to increase soybeans rapidly. 6 pounds per acre, which if they're 3,000 seeds per pound, that'd be 18,000 plants per acre. And they'll yield normally 75% of normal. 75% of normal. And I've seen, over 50 bushel. That's 6 pounds per acre. So the weed control is the most important aspect of it. And probably the number one reason why you put more plants out there is for weed control, unless you're going to take care of it, like you say, with a residual with your post. So those are decisions that you have to make. Do you go with a thinner stand and add more to your chemical program, or do you add more soybeans so you don't have to use as much chemical? So that's the big decision, but I'm not really worried too much about soybean with thin stands as far as being able to compensate. A soybean can compensate 18 inches according to that Crops and Soil magazine in any direction. So in other words, if you had a soybean 1 every 18 inches, it would close up.
Yep, couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, I think that the biggest point that I took out of that is the 2 bushel nominal. I mean, from an economic standpoint, your ease of mind is one thing, but you're not making potentially the right business decision for an operation. Plus, I mean,
what's a custom planting rate? 26, 27, 28 bucks an acre from Iowa State's chart. So, yeah, right there, just going across the field, you're probably breaking even.
Yep, and we've talked about it before. Your highest yielding soybeans are the ones that you're potentially going to knock out, especially with it seems like most guys that have the 1631, 1632 type planters have the no-till coulter on it, or if you have row cleaners, obviously picking them up, but if you have a no-till coulter on it, you have no choice. You're going to destroy some of that stand that you're going across, unless you're going to be able to slap that in between. But even then, we're talking about really crowding out some really good beans there that are going to run into, basically they're just weed control.
So, at our company, when we don't know what to do, because you always have those situations in agriculture and you don't know what to do. Sometimes we just do half, and that way we're either half right or half wrong. And so from my aspect of it, those are very tough decisions. And sometimes I think farmers, almost like a therapy, have to do something to feel better about it, so they go out and do it. And we always try to tell farmers, why don't you leave a check strip? If you replant, why don't you leave a check strip? And we really have a hard time for farmers leaving a check strip. And the reason why, I think they really sometimes don't want to know if they were half right or half wrong. It's a tough thing. And I always tell farmers, why it's so easy for us? I can tell you, it's not our money. When you have your money on the line, it is very hard to make those decisions. So sometimes listening to us and trusting us can be the right thing to do, but do half. When we get in those tough situations, that's what we do.
Yep. Some of the other things that are happening right now, if you do have beans that are emerged, we do have a few beans that are in the V1, V2, or probably not V2, but they're definitely in V1 stages. Nitrogen fixation, the Brady rhizobia bacteria should, at this point, be starting to accumulate on the roots, so you should start to be able to see the nodulization. So if you don't have a ton of nodulization, that may be something to look at for changing for next year, is getting an inoculant thrown in on that, on either in your treatment or in something through like a hopper throttle stance. So.
Yeah.
And I would take a look at too, in talking, getting to know more of these people in the biological space too. One thing that stood out to me in this past week, and something that I was challenged, was related to the nodulation too, is look at what you're putting on for nitrogen on your corn. Making sure that we're being very judicious with that, because if we have too much carryover nitrogen, that bean potentially is not going to want to put on as many nodules because it's being fed the free nitrogen, and what that causes for us is issues on the back end when we get into the reproductive stages, that we don't have the nodulation and the plant taking care of itself at its peak nitrogen time. So that was something that I thought was very interesting. It makes sense. So it's something that we're on our own farm going to take a look at the nitrogen levels in the soil through a nitrate test on both corn and beans, just to kind of see how things progress through and ground truth something there. But it's definitely in these, what I would probably down for you guys. Probably don't have to worry about that too much, but heavier prairie style soils. Definitely something to keep an eye on, because that is a potential there that we're doing good on the front end and the vegetative stage, but we're causing ourselves a potential yield penalty on the back end.
Yeah, soybean plant will always utilize nitrogen before it have to make its own, and so you're exactly right, Lynn. That's a really good point.
Yeah, might be why some of those areas around our growing footprint can raise really, really good corn, but their bean yields are always behind. Especially
on in thinking about it in years past, we've had questions on, hey, why they're just kind of slow and they're yellow. We're waterlogged. That could be it, but then when we get in years that's like, wow, our beans they just don't seem like they've got that oomph to them before. I know some of the mindset in farmers on corn is to throw their groceries at it, and potentially we were doing a really good job of raising corn, but we're doing it at the hindrance of our beans. And the nice part about that is that most likely if we're carrying over nitrogen, we're over applying. So as we get into these little more tougher times, we could potentially have a reduction in our nitrogen on our corn, save a little money on that end, maintain yield, and help our soybeans. So could be a win-win.
Good point.
Yep. That's basically everything I had for this week, Joe.
Are we going to put up that the University of Wisconsin, the soybean stages? Can we link that up?
Yep.
Which you're looking at right now, because they put out a really, really nice photographic view of the various vegetative stages and reproductive stages. So, when keep in mind that when it comes to spraying post-emergence, you're supposed to do it in before V2, correct? Before V2, V1 going into V2?
Yeah, there's a couple different schools of thought on that, but basically when the weeds are small is the main target. On corn, you're typically in that V4 to V6 time frame, and on soybeans, most of the time it's beer can height.
Yep.
Maybe a little bit taller than that. When guys typically wait till...
Pop can for those that don't partake.
Pop can for those who don't partake. I guess I'm guilty of one of those pleasures.
But Pepsi?
Yeah, sure. When soybeans are 3 to 4, 5 inches tall is typically when guys go out and start posting.
Yeah, I don't think you can... I think it's better to be early than late when it comes to weed control.
I think this year, for the folks that got in early, that's going to be extremely important, because what we're seeing right now, I guess in our neck of the woods, is that we are actually, for once, it seems like we're actually going through the development stages pretty quick on soybeans right out the gate. So we want to make sure that we are setting ourselves up for that weed control, because we're going to have really good growing conditions here coming up for the next month and a half for soybeans, but that's also really good growing conditions for weeds as well.
Yep, water hemp grows at the same speed as corn. It can grow inches very quickly.
Yep.
And on your corn side, I think that's right now for the early planted corn, that's a good idea too, because the reason there is some thought out there that if we can get into that V4, if we can try to stay out of V5, V6, we're not stressing that corn plant as it's trying to determine its rows around. So if you can be out there for that, and it seems like there's some research that's going on that even though we have Roundup Ready corn, there is some potential penalty for spraying that in that when the corn is determining its rows around. So if you're using Roundup V4, get out there and get it taken care of, and not have that plant stress going into that critical period of determining the rows around.
Yep. It's all going to be metabolized.
All right. Well, as you know, we end our session with a corny joke, because the seed company back in the 1930s used to put a corny joke on their seed guide that they mailed out to get people to turn the page. So I got a couple of them for you this week. And first one's a little bit about myself, Okay. I don't mean to brag, but the cashiers are always checking me out. That's pretty lame. Anyhow, the last one, it seems like everybody's obsessed with eggs and egg prices. Egg price going up, egg price going down. Okay. Well, anyhow, last night, someone broke into my house and stole a dozen eggs and left a saucepan full of warm water. Police think it could have been poachers. So there you are. Two fairly good ones, okay? Anyhow, thanks for watching and listening today. We sincerely appreciate your business. For those of you that are still waiting to plant, we're sending you dry weather, okay? We got to get going. I agree with you. And we know it's a little stressful for you. And before I close, I want to say Happy Mother's Day. Take care.